I think that worked in an era where transformation was a phase. We had one state, then we moved to another state, and the transformation roadmap was a 2-year phase of transition to get there. The reality now is you're in a constant state of change. There's so much new enhancement, new capabilities coming online in each of those different domains. The question now becomes, is there a single ecosystem that can work, or do I need a more dynamic ecosystem where parts kind of come and go as different phases of the transformation continue kind of unabated for a long time? And is transformation even the right word?
Welcome to TBR Talks, decoding strategies and ecosystems of the globe's top tech firms, where we talk business model disruption in the broad technology ecosystem, from management consultancies to systems integrators, hyperscalers to independent software vendors, telecom operators to network and infrastructure vendors, and chip manufacturers to value-added resellers. We'll be answering some of the key intelligence questions we've heard from executives and business unit leaders among the leading professional IT services and telecom vendors. I'm Patrick Heffernan, Principal Analyst, and today we'll be talking about everything management consulting and technology ecosystems with Kevin Bolen, Principal and Head of Strategy and Investments for KPMG Advisory. All right, welcome. Today, Boz and I are joined by Kevin Bolen, race car driver and partner at KPMG, and we're going to talk about a lot with respect to consulting and services and what's been happening as GenAI has sort of taken over a lot of our bandwidth and everybody else's. But I want to step back from the hype and the sort of current things that are going on and really look at the big picture. Because Kevin, you've been in this business, in the consulting, in the professional services business for how long?
25 years at least. Yeah.
25 years. So you've seen massive change, all of which is starting to accelerate now as we see what GenAI is doing to everything. So I want to start with one important thing that we've been talking about a lot lately. And Boz and I have had long conversations and a couple podcast episodes about ecosystems and how companies like firms like KPMG partner with Dell, partner with IBM, partner with Microsoft, and then partner with the hardware vendors as well, and how that whole ecosystem has been changing. And one thing that I know you've talked about is how services providers and consultancies can be the glue that holds that ecosystem together. But that's changing. And just tell me a little bit of why you think it's changing, what's coming for firms like yours, but also for other services providers in that changing ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the complexity of it and how that's exploded, say, in the last 10 years, right? So you've got clients who they're in a specific industry, but even the dynamics within their own industry are changing and being redefined by new entrants in their space. You've got the different expectations of each function within their enterprise and what they're looking to accomplish within those dynamics within their industry and how they need to respond. And you've got all these plethora of, buildups of opportunity and capability coming out. You've got the service provider domains, you've got the infrastructure and the cloud and hyperscaler domains, you've got the specific software application domains, and all of those are hitting the same, IT infrastructure organization to say, help me enable my business, help me achieve the expectations and drive that I need to achieve to maintain my competitive advantage in the marketplace. And I think historically, you might have had 2 or 3 players get together and do a handshake, a hardware player, a software player, a service provider would get together and try and bring a turnkey solution. The challenge now is you've got a proliferation of each one of those domains. And how do you start to bring that together? The service providers were typically the ones who knew the last mile, right? We knew the industry the best. We knew the functions the best. We could help the client navigate the diversity of hardware and software providers and then bring the stitching together, right? So make the different systems talk to each other, work through the interfaces, work through the migration, project management of that work going forward. I think that worked in an era where transformation was a phase. We had one state, then we moved to another state, and the transformation roadmap was a 2-year phase of transition to get there. The reality now is you're in a constant state of change. There's so much new enhancement, new capabilities coming online in each of those different domains. The question now becomes, is there a single ecosystem that can work, or do I need a more dynamic ecosystem where parts kind of come and go as different phases of the transformation continue kind of unabated for a long time? And is transformation even the right word? Are you really looking at a continuous state of change going forward, and how do organizations manage through that? Service providers have an obligation to stay ahead of that curve, to stay ahead of the awareness of what's coming on the next wave, Are you better leapfrogging this wave and waiting to the next one to come online? And what's going to be best for your organization at this moment in time?
Yeah. And so, I mean, transformation. What's we've gotten away from that? What's the word we're using now?
Well, optimization.
Optimization.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that sort of leads to, when you think about the way that you're positioned with your clients, you have positioned yourself, and I'm talking about the KPMG, but I mean consultancies broadly, positioned yourselves as the experts at building those roadmaps and helping through those transformations. And your clients are willing to pay you for that. Now you're saying to your clients, now you're going to have to pay us constantly because change is constant.
Mm-hmm. I think if you look back on it, they've pretty much been paying us constantly
Right.
forever. And I don't say that facetiously. The reality is we've been in this state of constant reinvention for longer than we've been willing to acknowledge it, right?
Yeah.
So it may be that the finance team transformed, and then the marketing team transformed, and then the HR team transformed, and then it was finance's turn again.
Yeah.
I think what you're now recognizing is it's not a sequential model any longer where I can afford to wait to do HR or wait to do marketing while I finish the finance project.
Yeah.
They all have to be happening simultaneously. And that's kind of what's overwhelming, a lot of the client leadership teams and their own capabilities, because the breadth of skills required in each one of these domains continues to evolve.
Right.
And it's just hard to, maintain and retain that talent, to bring that diversity of skill and capability to each new problem set. And so they lean on the service providers to supplement, that, to bring the latest skill sets, to bring the flexibility of capacity to different parts of the problem along the way. So I think, looking at the nature of our relationships, we've had the same relationship with an account for 10, 20 years in many cases. The mix of work has evolved over time. The challenge now is it's all kind of peaking at the same moment. It's no longer a predictable series of a 3-year transformation schedule. It's all the functions want all the transformation now. And how do you match that demand and help the clients navigate the expectations that are being set?
So we've talked about, and that gets to scale, because we've talked about people and permission and scale within consulting as being the 3 things you have to have. You have to have the permission. Your clients have to believe that you can actually do it. You have to have the skilled people can actually deliver, and then you have to have the scale, the number of people that, for global clients at least. How much has the permission part of that changed, do you think, in recent years? Because now, instead of saying, yeah, we've got the people that can help you with HR transformation, and then the next thing, now we have the people that can help you with supply chain. Now we have the people. Now they're looking for everything. How do you make sure that you maintain that permission at a client?
So I think they still look to the service provider to kind of understand their industry first and foremost, both the industry as it used to be and the industry as it's going to be going forward. And how do you align on that vision? And then how do you align on what each function needs to look like to live into that future vision? What does the finance organization need to look like if I'm migrating towards more of a services-based model versus a product-based company over time? Right. How does it change my marketing and my go-to-market strategy? How do I understand that? So they're still looking for that level of relevance, that kind of last mile that says you not only understand the industry, the functions, you understand me. Where am I at in the industry? Where am I? Am I a leader in this? Or am I trying to catch up? How urgent do I need to change my priorities as a result of that positioning? So they're looking for the service provider to bring that highly personalized level of insight to the equation. But that used to be where you could then start to recommend different partners in the technology space to work with. Now the clients are saying, we've already chosen XYZ environments, XYZ infrastructure, et cetera. So they're looking for you to bring that last mile, but also now do it within the construct of the environment they've already developed, because some of those things are not changeable. If I'm a Google shop, I'm not likely to change to AWS just because you think it might be better. We've kind of made a long-term commitment to this already. I need you to bring your insights and adapt it for my Google infrastructure choice that I've already made. So they're looking for both the expertise on the business side of the equation, but then also the technical environment, what the implications are for that in terms of either the constraints or the opportunities it presents on how they can move that forward. So as a service provider, we have to balance, every one of our partners needs to be technology savvy, right? Every one of our opportunities is now a technology orientation in some form or another.
Right.
And we have to understand how to bring the best of both of those. We have to have, to your point earlier about the ecosystem, we have to have the relationships with the various technology providers to collaborate with them to understand kind of what's on their drawing board, what's on their product roadmaps, what are they going to be releasing in terms of capability down the road, so that as we're advising our clients, we're preparing them for what that future state's going to look like, not designing something from 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what you're describing, and it's certainly something that resonates with me when it comes to the partner ecosystem evolution. We've been dabbling with the idea of development of supergroups, essentially, kind of going beyond the two-dimensional relationship and going a little bit deeper with select partnership. It's very hard to balance to become an exclusive partner to a particular technology alliance, but becoming more of a preferred partner and having that voice that it's being raised on both sides is very important. On three sides, having an infrastructure provider, having a software provider, having a services provider, having a device provider, kind of going to market together, certainly requires much more governance and accountability on each of the parties. But as long as each party understands and have that go-to-market messaging together, I think it's an important piece. We're actually in the middle of conducting a research around that. We call it Voice of the Partner. We're looking to publish in the next month or so. Essentially, that is sentiment analysis around how partners think of each other, what are they missing of each other, how they can go to market together, what are some of the industries, domain areas, the business models, going from sell with, sell through, sell, just trying to think about what's changing in those models. So, we're talking to alliance managers and above across three groups of vendors like OEMs, cloud providers, and professional service. So we'll be curious to hear how partners think of each other when they're not in the same room with each other. So that'll be an interesting some insights. But I 100% agree with you in terms of the changes of the ecosystem and those super groups. They sound good on paper. I think now we're moving to the next stage of trying to be a little bit more exclusive and try to be a little bit more preferred when it comes to go-to-market messaging and joint resources and whatnot.
When you think about your 25 years doing this, could you have imagined even 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, that there would be this coalescence around, well, first of all, could you have imagined the shift from we're going to recommend that you go with AWS to AWS is going to actually recommend you come to us? Did you see that shift coming? And then did you ever anticipate this move towards what Boz described as supergroups?
I'd love to say yes, I saw this all, perfectly, but I think the reality was part of it was a migratory shift, right? Mm-hmm. So I think once the choice of infrastructure became a semi-permanent choice, where the switching costs got so high, that empowered the infrastructure provider with a much greater sway and influence because you had such a large share of the IT spend going to that commitment. It influenced so many other decisions that they kind of asserted themselves, whether they led to that path directly or they just kind of found themselves in that role. They discovered that they suddenly had this kind of infrastructure model that they said, we're now first and all choices will come through our train station, so to speak. Yeah. So I think that was a pivot just based on, especially the cloud migration and everything that gave them a disproportionately larger voice around the table as the switching costs got higher and higher. And then I think to the point about the kind of broader ecosystem, what I think you're going to see now is in the past, it was easy. I won't say easy, that's not the right term, but it was more viable to kind of play the field, right? Where the infrastructure providers would want to play with all the systems integrators. Why wouldn't you want more people out there certified in your capability, making the adoption cost lower and easier to roll out the technology? From a provider standpoint, I had to play with all the players because my clients have a diversity of infrastructure. So I have to be fluent in all those different domains going forward. What you're describing now is for certain circumstances, you will see, I believe, a deeper tie-up beyond just the certifications and the go-to-market collaborations going forward. You're actually going to see things at a much deeper IP level where different parties will come together and start to collaborate on net new IP that any one provider or infrastructure player or hardware provider or software provider wouldn't have been able to do on their own. It takes that collective knowledge together. And then the question is going to get into the complexity of how do I monetize that going forward? How do I control that IP going forward? How do I maintain and share it going forward? How do we do the economics around it? So I think there's still some business model complexity around optimization of that, but I think it's going to be inevitable because the clients, back to my complexity comment, the clients will look at this and say, I need an answer. I need someone who's brought the various components together, who will get me to the benefit of those components, who will then help me maintain the currency of those components as they continue to evolve on their own trajectories, underneath it, whether that's a managed service or some sort of other architecture of the deal structure among the different parties. That's where I think it's going to get a little difficult. We have to work through those models, but I think it's inevitable that you will have certain consortiums of provider who have a leading position in X industry, X function, whatever it may be. and they become kind of the go-to because they've now cordoned off that opportunity for themselves. They've heavily invested in the IP and differentiation around that. And it'll be harder for other consortiums to say, do I want to play in that space? They're already kind of pretty well penetrated there. This other one over here, however, is ripe for our collaboration. Let's build a domain over in this space.
Yeah, I think I see already the whole idea of, I think what you're alluding to is the ecosystem orchestrator kind of a position. And that's the kind of big umbrella essentially that we see the services providers having a strong position to become those ecosystem orchestrators. But I think meanwhile, there's some stepping stones or building blocks as part of the ecosystem orchestrator, right? The most recent one we started observing is around becoming a model orchestrator. The large language models we see a slew of foundation model providers that are vying for attention of the ecosystem, right? Smaller, like more startups and clients becoming a little bit overwhelmed of like all the choices that they have to go with. And then comes the infrastructure provider, then comes the service provider, comes the ISV, and then you have to take a step back and say, what do I want to do? Do I want to be, just go with do I want to become another foundation model provider and build my own, or actually be the orchestrator for all the models and have the client choose the right model based on within the complexity of the environment they have to operate and whatnot. The other building block is the data orchestrator, right? So that's those two. I feel like, they're right now, the data orchestrator idea is kind of the older cousin of the model orchestrator, essentially, because without the data, the models cannot work. And kind of like, but without the models being, feeding the data and carrying the outputs, what's the data? The data is good as, just sitting in a silo. So I think these are the stepping stones we're observing right now in the behavior, how vendors are rethinking their positioning within their own ecosystem. So, just that's a couple of stepping stones, but I think the ecosystem orchestrator is the position of the future to a degree.
Well, I think the question also then is, where does that skill set best reside long term?
Yeah.
Is that a skill set the client's going to want to directly control and own on their side? And is that possible?
Yeah.
Do they have the breadth of resources and such to put against that skill set and retain that talent long term, who may find it more attractive to go work in the actual technical side of the equation? Does it reside in service provider role, and is that then more transitory, like we're there just for a phase in time and then they roll it out? Does it reside with the LLM and LAM providers themselves? Do they want to take that on as a ease of adoption kind of equation? Is that really a model that serves their purpose? That's a services model versus a license model that may be in conflict going forward. So I think there's going to be a bit of a shakeout. I think you're seeing a little bit of all the above right now. Yeah. I think the service providers are probably best positioned to play that role because we see multitudes of examples of implementations. We see what's working, what's not working. We're applying it ourselves, as kind of a client zero situation on our side too, so we can bring that experience to our clients in the midst. But I think over time, you also have to start to think about what does that role evolve to as the actual orchestration of this becomes easier. Yeah. Because to your point about the proliferation, there's so many choices out there. There's so many new things rolling out. There's a new one cropping up every 2 months, in these spaces at a fairly credible, level of productivity. Yeah. So it's not, you can just ignore those pieces of it. But over time, there will be a kind of culling out of that, right? There will be a phase where this becomes more stasis, more normal, more baseline. So the volatility around that will change, and therefore the volatility around those roles will change. So as you mentioned, the data scramble, totally agree with your sequencing of data has to be first before the language models will achieve what they want. But over time, because of the thrust that data has been put into right now, it will get better. It won't be as messy as what we're experiencing now, where I'm trying to take 20 years of legacy knowledge in a system that was never fit for purpose to begin with and put it into an AI engine and piece it all out. But we'll get through that bubble where the data will then be more clean, more accessible going forward. Then does the role of the data orchestrator start to evolve to that new position?
Yeah. And how much does the structure within consulting and IT services change to get into the internal working? So we talked about the ecosystem, we talked about the clients. Now we're talking about the other parts of the ecosystem with the large language models. But internally, you've seen a lot of change. And actually you haven't, because the consulting model is the same as it was when you joined the firm, when you first started professional consultancy. And so where are we going to go in 10 years? What's the internal business model look like for consulting?
Yeah, I think, you've always had the kind of traditional pyramid structure, right? So you had the kind of knowledge leaders at the top, a lot of the execution happening below, and the economics of charging a premium because of what I described before. It's either the capacity the specialized skill, the on-demand nature of that work. That's what clients have paid the premium for, because having that talent full-time in-house wasn't economically viable. It wasn't feasible from a talent attractiveness standpoint. So we provided that cushion and that knowledge and experience to bring to bear. And the economics have worked the same for quite a long time as this got professionalized back in the 50s and 60s. I think what you're going to start to see going forward is what is the AI amplification of those roles over time. There's a chart I've shown at previous venues where you had kind of a triangle, a pyramid, in the internet era, and you had skills, and then you had tools underpinning those skills.
Right.
Now you start to think that triangle becomes a bit more of an obelisk style shape, because AI starts to surround all the roles. So instead of just being, it goes all the way up, right?
Yeah.
So even some of the more knowledge-led, senior positions in a role can start to get supplemented by AI. Right. So you take more the manager, the director level people, kind of in the narrower part of the pyramid at the top. Maybe they can manage greater volumes of work now because AI is taking some fraction of the work away. So instead of spending 20% of their time on timesheet reconciliation and budgeting and planning, AI can do a chunk of that. So they can spend more of their time on the client-facing, value-added parts of their manager job, and suddenly now the capacity to do the work can increase without having to increase the talent and labor associated with it.
But those people have to be trained on how to use AI.
Sure.
So a counterpart of yours at one of the other big four firms told me that other than training that was mandated, that was required, certified, training that you have to do, the most in demand and the most hours at the partner level in the last year was spent on GenAI. Are you seeing the same thing at your firm?
Yeah, I think we're pushing GenAI at all levels,
Yeah.
right? Because that efficiency gain, it can occur everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So there's parts of my day job that AI can help with.
Yeah.
And the more I can use AI to offset that portion of the job, the more I can devote that same hour to something else, on my to-do list, so to speak. So I think it's a universal adoption. That's why I said it does surround all the different roles. Now, obviously, it's got greater applicability for certain roles. IT testing and software development is probably going to see a greater percentage of utility near term. Longer term, they'll change, but near term, they're going to see a greater percentage of utility right now, which means more capacity gain at that position than perhaps at my position.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean any of us can be immune from it. We should all be looking to benefit there. Then I think you start to look at how does that change the economics overall of the industry when clients start to perceive what the changes are. It will elevate their expectations of the role that the humans are playing.
Right.
Which means everyone has to kind of keep an eye on the skill sets and the job descriptions and how those are going to have to evolve over time. So it used to be a certain volume of throughput was expected at the associate or senior associate level. That volume of throughput is going to change. And you're going to have to rewrite kind of your performance expectations, your job descriptions around what you're going to be spending your time doing when you come into some of those roles. And as you move your way up the ranks, that's going to continue to change.
I think when RPA robotic process automation first started catching fire, one of the things that I heard over and over again was it was going to allow people to do higher value tasks. And the question I kept having was, why aren't they doing those higher value tasks now? And do you really know what those higher value tasks are? And I think that's going to be one of the challenges with GenAI is everything you were just saying depends on the people that are going to be doing those higher value tasks actually knowing what they're going to do and be able to be measured on those tasks and be able to actually deliver. So I think that'll be a challenge as well.
So I'll change the equation a little bit in how you're framing it, because I do believe there are portions of higher value tasks. One of my colleagues calls AI takes out the soul crushing part of your day. Which is the raw gut part that you have to slog your way through in order to add the value that you want to add on the back end of it. It could be formatting, it could be data cleanup, whatever it may be, to get to the part of the value add that you want to do. But I also think over time, the question of what is value add will start to change. I mean, so if you look at manufacturing and automation there, a skilled laborer used to be a welder, right? And so that was a core skill, and you wanted them to spend more time welding because that's what their primary skill was. Now it's robotic automation, right? So now I'm operating the robot that's doing the precision welding because that started to displace that skill set. So it's a different skill. So the entry level role there is now the ability to run the welding robot, not actually do the welding myself any longer.
Right.
I think you're going to see the same thing happen in a variety of service, industry positions where the entry level position isn't around doing the nuts and bolts analysis or data cleanup or things of that nature. It's going to be the tool has done that work for you. Now you're going to add this layer of value on top of it, augmented and enabled by AI.
Yeah.
So what a junior level person can do today may look like what someone with 3 to 4 years experience could have done a couple of years before.
Right.
But the tool now brings that level of capability right into the entry level position.
Right. Yeah. This has been excellent. I have one last question. Since I mentioned at the beginning, you're a race car driver. So I grew up in Germany. Boz grew up in Bulgaria. So I know for me, the car that I always wanted to drive when I was growing up was a Porsche 911. That was like the coolest thing. I know for Boz, it was a Yugo. I don't know, Boz, if you remember which number Yugo it was that you always wanted to drive. But I guess I'll ask you both. Like, if you could drive any car, if you could walk out of this studio and step into the parking lot outside of TBR and get into your car and drive away, what would be your absolute dream car to drive that you've never driven? Because I know you've driven a lot of them.
I've driven a few, and so this is where cars become very circumstantial, right? So am I driving home on the highway? In which case, a beautiful convertible in a nice sunny day is the right way to do it. If I'm driving on a racetrack, I have a different answer. But I think to me, probably the pinnacle car that I would love to try and drive is a Ford GT40 from the Le Mans era.
Okay.
That's those are very rare, very hard to come by. Yeah. But I would love an opportunity to just go through that experience one day. That would be on my bucket list.
Okay.
The 14-year-old in me was a Lamborghini Countach.
Yeah,
that's where I had all the posters and stuff like that. But I think as I've matured, I've started to appreciate the GT40 experience. I think would be my top.
All right. Boz, I'll let you have the last word. What is it? It's not the Yugo, I know.
No, it's not the Yugo, but definitely a car has a manual transmission. That's definitely a prerequisite for me. And I agree with Kevin here on am I driving on Nürburgring racetrack and, in Germany and kind of like going like off limits on the speed, or am I going home on 95?
Yeah,
that's
the special circumstances driving.
But I would lean onto something more in that 60s, 70s era, kind of a Mustang, kind of a muscle car, something manual transmission, anything that from that era. I think I've never tried it, but I'm definitely curious to get in one and just keep driving. So
I'm sticking with the 911 or a 914. I would drive.
I have been into 911. Yeah. I could not fit.
Yeah.
I'm a tall guy. I could not fit. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a pleasant experience. So that's my thing. So I need something bigger that I can fit. So
excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Great conversation. Really appreciate it. Good start to season 2 of TBR's podcast. So really appreciate it. Thanks.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Next week, I'll be speaking with TBR senior analyst Ben Carbonneau about NVIDIA. Don't forget to send us your key intelligence questions on business strategy, ecosystems, and management consulting through the form in the show notes below. Visit tbri.com to learn how we help tech companies large and small answer these questions with the research, data, and analysis my guests bring to this conversation every week. Once again, I'm your host, Patrick Heffernan, Principal Analyst at TBR. Thanks for joining us, and see you next week.